Good morning everyone. My name is Dr. Syed Afnan Ahmed and I'm here to discuss about the strategies to crack band 9 for the speaking module, and this is the part 2. So without any further ado, let's just begin with the topic. Since we have already discussed about part 1, now let's just move to the cue card, which is the part 2, and how you should answer your part 2 question. So for the speaking part 2, you will be given a cue card and you will have 1 minute to prepare for your answer. You will then be given 2 minutes to speak about it. Many consider speaking part 2 as the most difficult part because it is a monologue. That is, you need to speak for complete 2 minutes and the examiner will judge you. So what's the aim behind this cue card? The examiner wants to check the following. Number 1, you can talk at length about the topic on the IELTS cue card. Number 2, you can organize your ideas. Number 3, how fluently you talk without any noticeable effort. And number 4, how good you express using the appropriate vocabulary and the grammar. A very basic thing about the cue card is once the cue card is present, like this one at the left side, which says describe a course that you want to learn in future. You don't have to talk about every bullet point. You can be specific and you can talk about 2 to 3 bullet points, or you can talk about all the 5 bullet points. That's just up to you. You will be given a question at the start of the test, which would be followed by 3 to 4 bullet points. The bullet points are there just to guide you. However, if there are one or two that you don't want to talk about, make sure you talk in general topic and you will be fine. You just need to complete the 2 minutes that have been given to you. Having a strategy is very pivotal if you want to succeed in the IELTS test. As for the speaking, I have cracked this code. I have formalized this by a simple strategy. Start by drawing a background, which should be followed by time, place, person, family, friends, and weather. Then come to the topic and answer the questions in the bullet points. Then, give a reference or a relatable example, talk about the past, future experiences as well. This will suffice and help you to cover the 2 minutes. You can also check out these two videos and other videos as well. All these videos are to help you gain the band you required. A very common question that I receive from the students is how should we prepare for the cue card? So number 1, never ever memorize your answers. There are too many topics for you to memorize, and it is highly unlikely that you will get the same topic in the real test. It is a complete utter waste of time and leads to some very strange answers. If the examiner spots this, they are allowed to give you a band 0 performance. Number 2, focus on your fluency and your pronunciation. Number 3 is the most crucial. Time yourself so you know how much you have to talk within the span of 1 to 2 minutes. At the start of the cue card, you will be given 1 minute which you should use very wisely. You will have 1 minute to prepare before you start speaking. You will not have enough time to write the full sentences. You will, however, be able to write the keywords. These keywords should guide you throughout your talk and help you if you can't think of the ideas. Of course, its optimum use will only come if you practice enough to get the ideas and generate them in a similar fashion. So here's a relatable example which is just given below in the blue pointers. If you are given 1 minute, which is a very short time, especially during the exam when you're suffering from the apprehension. So you should write all the points with the arrows, which would really help you make out a short note which will guide you for the rest of the speaking session. So how would you make a story out of these pointers which are given below? Let's give it a try.
It was a lovely sunny day with a cool breeze around, and I was at home having a hearty breakfast meal with my family. Out of the blue, I received a call from my cousin, whom I am so fond of. We had a prolonged discussion regarding a surprise birthday party which he was planning for his dear father. He wanted to buy something really special, one thing that he could cherish for a very, very long time, something that he won't forget. So finally, we agreed on buying a laptop. And this laptop was not an ordinary one, it was just one of a kind. So we managed to meet up at the mall somewhere around 5 pm, and there we started our search. As I have a knack for buying these gadgets, my cousin was completely relying upon me to buy the best one. So I did my best, and finally, I was able to look at a laptop which was black in color. Actually, it was matte black in color. It was lying at the top of the shelf at the right side. It immediately caught my eye, and I just wanted to buy it then and there. Surprisingly, we were able to buy that gift, and we both were full of the joys of the spring. Now we had to rush back and decorate the home and call our friends and family for the gathering. I could carry on with the story with the pointers that I have made, and this is how you have to make the story as well. So use your 1 minute wisely, and for further details, you can always reach out to me and get more ideas or watch the YouTube link that I've always told you about. All the keywords are given over there.
Next, we move to where you draw your answers from. So, personal experiences are best, but telling a lie is fine too. Of course, the best answers are always about the things that you have actually experienced in your life. You will be able to describe these things in much more detail, and you will also be able to talk more coherently about them. Students tend to be much more confident talking about the real experiences, and this helps them with their fluency and pronunciation. However, few of the cue cards might be much trickier, and you might have not experienced at all in your entire life. It is fine to lie. The examiner will never check your answer or worry about whether they are true or not. However, they might ask you a follow-up questions, so be prepared for those. The best strategy that I can think of is to use real life experiences first and then add some lies to help you answer the question fully. Use your imagination and you will be fine. Next thing to solve your cue card is to expand your ideas. It is much better to fully expand each main idea than to state lots of main ideas and not develop them at all. This will help you give more impressive answers, and it is also a better use of your time. It is much easier to think of a few relevant ideas and develop them than is to think of lot of different ideas. For example, if the cue card question is describe your recent travel, you should always discuss about a single place. Go into the depth of it and develop your ideas rather than talking about many different places. So, when you're practicing, a good way to expand your main ideas is to use who, what, why, where, and how. This will help you quickly and easily to develop main ideas, and you will also get used to the grammar structures needed to do this. Normally, you would easily find these who, what, why, where, and how within the bullet points of the cue card. If you don't find them, you can create an answer of your own and you can easily speak for complete 2 minutes. Finally, we have come back to speaking part 3 for better results. Now, moving on to part 3. This is your opportunity to really develop your answers and discuss the issues brought up by the examiner. Part 3 will be linked to the topic you discuss in part 2, which will last for 4 to 5 minutes. So, after the 2 minute of the cue card monologue in part 2 of the speaking test, the examiner will ask you around 4 to 5 more abstract questions, and these are about the same general topic you talked in about part 2. If part 2 was about mobile phones, they might ask you deeper and more complex questions about the mobiles, which is, for instance, number 1. How has mobile phones changed the type of relationships people make? Number 2. Some people think that children should not be allowed to use cell phones. Do you agree? Number 3. How has mobile phone use changed in the last 10 years? Number 4. How will mobile phones change in the future? Number 5. If you could add new feature to a smartphone, what would it be? So after discussing the strategies for part 1 and part 2, let's discuss about the strategy for part 3. Number 1. Don't try to finish quickly. This test is not about how quickly you speak and how quickly you finish the test. Part 3 especially is a lot trickier than the other parts as the examiner has two-way discussion with you. Hence, it is wise that you always hear the question clearly and try to give a complete answer of 2 to 3 sentences. as this is your final shot to impress the examiner rather than finishing off with a single sentence. Number 2. Know that the examiner is trying to stretch you. Part 1 is just a warm up, and Part 2 is a cue card monologue. So, Part 3 is the examiner's chance to really test you and stretch your language abilities to the very limit. The main thing to remember is that they will ask you difficult questions, the ones you won't be able to answer as well as you hoped. They will often increase the difficulty until you can't answer the question. They are not trying to be cruel. This is just the best way for them to test your knowledge of grammatical structures and vocabulary. If you know this is going to happen, you will not get stressed out and you will answer the questions more confidently and get higher scores. Point number 3. Don't be afraid to ask the questions. There will be words in some questions that you don't really understand. The rule is that you ask the examiner to explain what one word means, but you can't ask them to explain the whole sentence. You can also ask the examiner to repeat the question if you don't quite get what they said. But please don't abuse this privilege and don't try to use it for every other question. Point number 4. Always give an answer. So, there will be at least one question that you have no idea how to answer. The most important thing to do is at least make an attempt. You have been speaking for 15 minutes, and one question is not going to lower your marks for the whole test. However, the worst thing you can do is to simply not attempt an answer. If you have this mindset, then you won't push yourself to the limit of your abilities. It is also fine to admit that you have no idea. Simply say, I'm really not sure about this question, but if I had. Believe me, the examiner will be much happier that you attempted an answer rather than just saying, I don't know, or blankly looking at them, which happens more than you think. You can also give yourself time to think about the question by saying, that's a difficult question, just give me a second to think about it. Or, I have never thought about that, to be honest. Give me a moment. However, don't do this for every other question, only the ones you need to actually think about. Point number 5. Think about what structure the examiner is testing. The examiner needs to know that you are capable of using a wide range of structures. Don't worry about inserting as many structures as possible into your answers because they will ask you specific questions to test specific grammar structures. So let's just look at one example. How have mobile phones changed the type of relationships people make? This is an opinion slash past slash present sort of question. Let's see another question. Some people think that children should not be allowed to use mobile phones. Do you agree? This is an opinionated sort of question, so you need to give your opinion. Another question is, how has mobile phone use changed in the last 10 years? This is something relating to the past and present perfect tenses. Another question is, how will mobile phones change in the future? This is some sort of prediction or speculation. Last question, if you could add any new feature to the smartphone, what would that be? So it's a hypothetical sort of question and you can make up any of the feature you want to and then answer. All of these are being tested by the examiner and see how coherent you are. So that was the end of part 3. Now we shall talk about the marking criteria for the Speaking IELTS module. Speaking section is based on 4 modules. Number 1 is the fluency and coherence. Number 2 is the grammatical range and accuracy. Number 3 is the lexical resource. And number 4 is the pronunciation. Now let's just talk about the pronunciation. So pronunciation is one of the most crucial skills to master in the IELTS speaking test. Pronunciation also affects your fluency and it accounts for more than 25%. Quite simply, it would be easier to say, without pronunciation, no matter how good your fluency, grammar, or vocabulary are, if the examiner can't understand what you are actually saying, you will struggle in all the areas. Pronunciation is often the area that causes most of the problems, and many think that it is difficult to learn. Always remember Your accent is not important in the IELTS speaking test because students from all over the world appear for the IELTS test and having a different accent is not a problem. Pronunciation is actually your ability to make the sound of a word clearly and correctly, that is, being clearly audible to the examiner, whereas the accent is a distinctive way in which you pronounce a word. This can be affected by the place you live and the places your parents lived, or even your social status as well. Now let's just see the common problems that the student have for the pronunciation part. The most common problem is not being able to produce an individual phonemes properly. This leads to a breakdown in the communication because it stops the examiner understanding the word you're trying to say. For instance, if you cannot pronounce a word journey properly and you say journey or Jenny, it would be difficult for the examiner to understand or to interpret what you're trying to say, and thus this will lower your marks. Another problem, which is quite common, is the little or no use of the intonation. This make it sound like that you have no emotion at all or you're not interested in the topic. For instance, if a question is being asked, describe a recent travel, and if you have no intonation at all, this is how you would sound like. Recently, I have traveled to the place which I like a lot. And if you have the intonation, you would sound a bit different and you would say, oh gosh, recently I've been to this place and this place is so amazing. Third problem can be not emphasizing at all or emphasizing the wrong words in the sentence. Whereas the fourth problem is saying each word very empathetically without any linking or weak sounds. So, after talking about the pronunciation, now we will move towards the vocabulary, which is also called as the lexical resource. Vocabulary is the most underrated area of the test. Most students think the learning list of high level words or idioms will get them the necessary score. In fact, it's probably the best way to lower your score. You should use vocabulary only as a tool to help you communicate clearly, not to show off. Now, let's just look at few examples for the cell phone. Some of these words can be very useful for the candidates during the exam. These words are advanced phones, cutting edge technology, outdated phones, modern, useful, features, apps, screen, resolution of the phone, operating system, either the iOS or the Android, and the user interface, and so on. So, most of these words are very specific for the cell phones, technology, or the gadgets, and all of these helps the candidates to give a very clear answer to the examiner. Without these words, a student cannot really score a good band, and knowing these terms are quite important. So, what is the most common problem students face with the use of vocabulary? Number one, the use of vocabulary they are not sure about. Number two, most of the students try to insert long, complicated words into their speaking test in the hope that they will get the high score. Unfortunately, you have to use the words which are accurate, otherwise, you will lose your marks. Lastly, using lots of less common words inappropriately is one of the signs that someone has a very limited vocabulary. So always follow the 100% rule and only share those vocabularies with the examiner that you are sure about. So, use only those words that you are 100% sure about. You should also know the meaning, the grammar, the collocations, the synonyms, and the antonyms of this word, as well as what context it should be used in. If you don't have a wide ranging vocabulary, you just don't know enough words to get the high band. To counter this, you can check my YouTube channel. The link is provided in the description. Now we move towards the third section, which is the grammatical range and accuracy. You should always avoid making grammatical mistakes. Having a wide enough range of grammar and to be able to talk about a range of things along with the use of complex sentences can really help you get a band aid. The examiner might ask you to talk about the past or future. You should also need to be aware of different type of functional language, such as how to give your opinion, how to explain something, how to talk hypothetically, and how to compare and contrast ideas. So, what are the common obstacles that the student face with the use of the grammatical range? Number one, usage of such grammatical structures of functional language that they are not sure about. This results in huge errors and your sentences are not quite clear. The second main problem is making small careless mistakes. These mistakes that are totally avoidable and they can be easily corrected. Remember that you can't get a band 7 or 8 for grammar issues if your 50% of the sentences have mistake in them. Moving to the last section of the speaking, which is the fluency and coherence. Let's talk about fluency first. So, fluency is quite tricky because it is connected to your grammar, your vocabulary, and your confidence. So, what is fluency? Fluency is your ability to speak smoothly and at an appropriate speed without any unnatural pauses. This is commonly misunderstood by a lot of students, and they believe talking fast is all about fluency. If you relate to a native speaker, they don't talk very fast and there are plenty of pauses. This is completely acceptable, and you don't want to make a lot of pauses than usually normal. So, what is the best tip to improve your fluency? Number one, speak calmly and smoothly. Listen to a native speaker and try to copy their pace of speech. Number two, don't focus on the quality of your ideas. Don't think too much. Instead, focus on the quality of your speaking. Number three, learn how to structure your answer, and you need to practice this at home. Number 4. Don't focus on grammar and vocabulary. Practice speaking fluently by recording yourself and then fix your grammar and vocabulary mistakes. Number 5. Taking little pauses with and is okay if you do it infrequently. Native English speakers do this too. And lastly, number 6. Don't get stressed. If you have practice enough, you will do well. Just trust on yourself and have confidence. So, coherence means being logical and consistent. How well you explain and expand your ideas with possible explanation and examples. So, how can coherence be tested? So, if the examiner asks you a question, they should completely understand your answer and you should answer the question fully. The most common problem that the candidates have with coherence is the inappropriate use of discourse markers or overusing them. These discourse markers are just the connectors or the linking phrases. Other problems for the coherence include not answering the question. It is very frustrating for the examiners. Often students answer the question they want to rather than the question being asked. If you don't answer the question, it is very difficult for the examiner to follow what you are saying and your marks will suffer. The final problem is not giving long enough answers. You need to explain what you mean fully and give examples where appropriate to really get the higher band. In this section, we will understand what does the examiner really dislikes. Examiner would never want to see how many answers you have memorized, how many big, fancy, high-level words you know. Examiner would also dislike how many different grammar structures and tenses you know. Examiner would also dislike if you would try to fake an accent. So how about what the examiner wants to see? The examiner wants to know how well you can communicate through spoken English. He would also prefer that you always remember that the exam is just about simply testing you how well you can open your mouth and communicate in English. So always remember, you need to work on your fluency, your lexical resource, your pronunciation, and your grammar. Just keep it simple and don't make it complicated. So during the test, how would you interact with the examiner? If you want the examiner to repeat the question, you can say any of these statements. I'm sorry, I didn't get it. Can you say that again, please? Or you can say, can you repeat the question, please? You can also say, sorry, could you repeat the question, please? You can also ask the examiner to explain a word. You can say any of these statements. I'm sorry, but I don't quite understand the word X. Can you explain it to me? You can also say, I am a little confused about the word X. Can you tell me what it means? You can also say, sorry, can you explain what X means? So here are some phrases that you can use in front of the examiner, but you need to be careful while you use them. Here are few statements. That's a difficult question, or that's a tricky question. Let me think for a second. You can also say, I've never thought about that before. Please give me a second. You can also say, I'm going to have to think about that one for a few seconds. You can also say, I've really no idea. Just give me a moment. There are few statements that you can say when you are just about to start an answer. You can say, if I had to say. You can also say, off the top of my head. You can also say, without knowing too much about this topic, I would say. So that will be the end of this video. I hope you have learned a lot about speaking, and still if you have any queries, you can leave those at the comment section. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Please like and subscribe my channel. All the links are already given at the description, so check out those as well.